Excellent. Well, thanks to all who've joined today. We are kicking off this session today, which is really focused on real products that exist. These are not MVPs. These are things that are out in the real world that you can use today, and are really low-risk use cases of products that have AI kind of sprinkled into them and are expanding, obviously, their uses. And so really wanted to think about where can we start using AI in a safe way, in a way that's not going to get us all sued or take us to the liability police, right? Where can we really start using it today and start getting a taste of it? And so this is one of the sessions in our AI for Smart People series that myself, Cheryl Wilson Griffin, and Legal Tech Consultants is putting on. And the goal of this whole series is really to bring together the legal community, everybody from GCs, chief legal officers, legal ops, law firms, innovation teams, and founders and startups. Bring everybody to the table and really talk about these issues that we're all facing, we're all dealing with, and figure out how to get through them together, right? Let's figure out how to educate each other about what's going on, and let's talk about where we go from here, right? Because we're all navigating this brave new world together. Nobody's far ahead of anyone else. That's the cool thing about this. And so we're all kind of learning on the same path. I've been doing this, not AI, but been doing legal tech for about 20 years. And it's all new to me as well. So there's lots to learn. Every day I learn something new, and hopefully you're on this learning journey with us. There are a number of sessions. I think there's 5 sessions that we've already recorded, which will be published on through Spotify and Apple Podcast and Google Podcast, anywhere you get your podcast shortly. Right now, they're also available on the Legal Tech Consultants YouTube channel. And they do kind of follow a natural arc. So we started at the beginning with like, what's an LLM? What are tokens? What should you be thinking about? And move through how to choose projects. Where do you go next? How do we put guardrails on? We talked about e-discovery. And so now we're kind of thinking about where else can we apply AI? Next week, before the holiday break, we have a super fun session with Jerry Bowie and Cassie Burns. Feel free to bring your own alcoholic beverage or your turkey leg, whatever you're into for Wednesday's session. We're going to be talking about deep fakes, forensics, nerdy AI tech things. So we're going to get super deep into like weird AI stuff next week. So I hope you'll join us before you ditch out for the weekend. That should be a fun session. So without further ado, I would love to jump in and let my esteemed panelists introduce themselves, and then we can jump in and kind of start this journey. So Kathy, I thought you're in my upper left, thought we'd start with you.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, Cheryl, thank you so much for having me on this podcast. So excited to be talking about this this topic. So I'm Kathy. I'm co-founder and CEO of Streamline AI. And I'll just share a little bit about my background because it's kind of non-traditional for a tech entrepreneur. I started out as an attorney. Actually, I've been practicing as an attorney for over 10 years. I started out in corporate practice at a law firm called Wilson Sonsini, which is based out on the West Coast and represents many technology companies, including Google, Apple, many other, huge names. I'm sure most of our audience have heard about. And what I discovered there was actually my passion was more on the business side. I felt like the startups, had all the excitement, they had all the fun. So after a few years of practice,
Okay.
I joined now, which is a B2B SaaS company, and then I left. Okay, sorry, my internet.
Yeah, you broke up for just a split second.
Hopefully, you can hear me.
Oh, you're good now. Yep.
There we go. Okay. And most recently, I was AGC at DoorDash, where I grew and led the commercial legal department from just me to over 12 people. So that was a really exciting journey and got to see a ton throughout that time. And that's really what led to the aha moment. What I identified as the gap that every single in-house legal department needed to fill. And that's what caused me to leave my practice, join up with a Google engineer, product lead, AI expert to build Streamline AI.
Excellent. That's quite an amazing journey, and you've had a lot of experience before you actually stepped out the door and went onto the tech side. Eric, how about you? Would love to hear a little bit about your background.
Awesome. That's a tough act to follow. So my name is Eric Baum. I am a Bard attorney in the state of Florida. I've been practicing law for 10 years. And right out of law school from the University of Miami, I started working at the Palm Beach County State Attorney's Office as an assistant state attorney. I was always very interested in criminal law, as my friends were doing like boat insurance cases, and I was working on triple homicides over the summer. It was a no-brainer for me to go into criminal prosecution. So I just worked my way up to the Special Victims Unit. The primary focus of my work the last sort of half decade that I was there was in the Special Victims Unit, primarily focusing on internet crimes against children, human trafficking crimes, sex crimes. And so a lot of jury trial experience. Towards the end of my time at the state attorney's office, my brother, who is a tech entrepreneur, asked me, what is the most inefficient part of the practice of law? And the answer was staring me in the face, as I had a stack of discs of body-worn cameras that I had to listen to be transcribed, and another stack of jail calls that I had to listen to review. And it was like, you have detectives and attorneys that are listening to hours and hours of audio and video, and you have court reporting costs that are just astronomical. The whole court reporting workflow seemed so outdated and inefficient to me that there has to be a way to incorporate technology to make it more efficient and to get more than just a paper transcript. So started building that as a side project, and then but I thought I'd be a career prosecutor. I thought I'd go state and then federal. And unfortunately, one of my kids had a health issue that required me to take a long leave of absence, and just had to transition into another way of life that allowed me to be at home and be away from the office for long periods of time. And it led to diving full-time into Parrot and developing technology for court reporting and transcript purposes. So, and now I'm here.
Here we are, right? So that's a great journey, and I think that's something that a lot of folks, whether they're lawyers or not, both of your journeys can identify with, right? So let's dive in a tiny bit to the products and talk about that. And maybe, Eric, since we ended with you, maybe we'll start with you. And let me just throw up a slide here while we're at it and share my screen. So why don't we talk a little bit about your product and kind of the problem it solves and where kind of AI fits into it?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I'll do my best to absolutely be brief, is that court reporting is extremely expensive and it's extremely inefficient. You hire a court reporter to show up for your deposition. It costs hundreds of dollars just for them to sit there and type, and then you get nothing in return unless you order a certified transcript. And so it's just an extremely inefficient practice. And then on top of that, you have all the big box major vendors that are now charging for Zoom hosting fees and archival. If you, God forbid, you don't order a transcript, it's even more expensive sometimes. And so the idea is that this workflow of having to order a certified transcript, of having nothing but, your chicken scratch notes to work with, or having to wait 10 days, 2 weeks, a month for a transcript to come in on a case that's going to eventually settle, is extremely costly and is extremely inefficient. And so what we did, is we looked at some of the different modalities of court reporting and found that court reporters that use stenomasks or oral stenography were already using technology to transcribe depositions. So they were just there. So the way the stenomask works, is you're just repeating the testimony into a mask, and it feeds it into an automated speech recognition technology, a very rudimentary one and an inaccurate one that the reporter then has to correct. But we said, if we can create a very, very accurate version of it, and we can provide it to attorneys very quickly, then now you're saving a significant amount of money. You can still order a certified if you want to, but you get a real time, and within 90 minutes of your depo ending, you're getting an almost verbatim transcript. So what we did, is that we evolved the technology behind oral stenography, and now we can pull it right from the Zoom call with multi-track, multi-channel audio. And so what you get is like a 97% accurate transcript, within almost an hour of your depo being done. And it is all it's all audio and video. It's all free. Every other court reporting company charges, $150, $200 an hour to record the video of your remote depo, which, by the way, is just a setting in Zoom. So, we don't charge anything for that. And so the idea is that you get an audio video depo in every single case. And it's synced up. Like, typically it costs thousands and thousands of dollars to sync up a transcript when you're preparing for trial, and we do it automatically. So a lot of the insurance carriers love working with us, defense firms, really anybody that has to, put together a summary of their depo quickly after, you don't have to order a certified transcript anymore just to get your summary done. If you want one, you can. But that's the idea. And that was the basis of the company. And since then, we've really evolved to using AI and generative AI for more advanced features like semantic level stuff, talking about like basically summarizing the depo for you. And some of the stuff we're working on, right, is like inputting a fact pattern and proposing depo questions. And so basically just getting out of the email, getting out of these dusty, bankers boxes where depos and paper and transcripts live, and creating it into an interactive database that you can leverage and you and your clients can use. So
I love that. And it's going to, I think it'll change kind of the way that we even approach court reporting going forward, right? Like you said, it's going to be more accessible to people who might not have ever ordered their transcripts in the past. And then thinking about the things that you can add on, the summarization, I can think of poor secretaries and paralegals and junior associates, slaving away over boxes of these things, reading them and then summarizing them and then handing them up the chain of, for years and years and years of my legal career. Now we can do it with technology.
Right. And the whole thing, right, is that right now you order a transcript, they just send you an email with a PDF in your email, right? And it lives in your support staff's email. And that's all you get. You get a paper transcript you can print out. If you want anything more, right? You want syncing, you want video, you want all this stuff. You're just like 5 to 10 times the cost. And we have the tech to do it. And so what's actually interesting is that this is sort of, incontrovertible, is that there is a major traditional court reporter stenographer shortage in the country. I mean, the National Court Reporting Association has issued reports about this. And particularly in states like in California, they just issued a report that there were like 100,000 cases, 100,000 hearings that went without a record. I think it was in the first 2 or 3 months of this year because there's no court reporter to be present for the hearing. And so this is a real problem that I'm very much hoping to garner support for attorneys to care about. Because there are efficient, accurate, reliable ways to do this that don't involve having this old school way of doing things.
So again, low risk. This is something we're already doing. We're just making it better. It's an incremental improvement on something that we're already doing.
Right. Every court, and my last thing on that is every courthouse, I think in the state of Florida and probably the country at this point, electronically records every single hearing they have. And then if you want a transcript later, right, they're going to transcribe it. And so what's interesting is that these workflows haven't extended to depositions and other types of proceedings for some point. And so it's very interesting to see, and as we explore this, to say, well, is it reliable enough for the court for a trial where someone's life is on the line, but attorneys aren't using it in a $5,000 auto crash case? So,
right.
So yeah.
Love that. I love that. Man, see, that's why as soon as I saw your technology, I was like, oh, I love it. It's so easy and simple to understand, and it's such a game changer, I think. Right. Kathy, let's jump in a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about your product, because I was equally as really taken with your product. So let's talk a little bit about, let me click over here. Let's talk a little bit about Streamline. Let's talk a little bit about what it does and kind of the problem to solve and how you're working AI into it.
Yeah, absolutely. So interesting, because we're approaching it from, the same angle, in the sense that this is a practical pain point that both, clearly Eric experienced on his side, in his world, in the litigation world. But for me, in my practice, which was in-house, right, and transactional, what I was seeing was just absolute chaos. Like every single day I'd wake up and my inbox would have hundreds of emails. My Slacks would be, bloodbath. Everyone's slacking and asking, where's this, where's that, escalating things, but I was getting everything piecemeal. So I was wasting tons of time.
Uh-oh, we lost you for a second. Maybe turn your video off for
tuning in. And there's so much time wasted with just, with just the back and forth, right? The back and forth that's happening between legal and the business, just trying to get a handle on what is actually going on, and then sending things off manually for approval, and collecting that. So that was actually the huge inefficiency for me. And the other part that caused this black box problem that we talk about at Streamline was actually just not being able to access metrics. So if you think about a legal department versus any other business, we're often so reactive, right? So when we are actually asking for resources or planning headcount, we don't have real numbers to go by, and instead it's a gut hunch, right? Which we know is accurate, but when we're talking to the CFO, it's a very different story. So my kind of insight was what every single corporate legal department needs is actually an tool to sit at the front door to automate everything that comes in. And as you can see from the screen here, Streamline integrates with Slack, it integrates with your email, and integrates with Salesforce. We actually integrate with 10 different tools. We bring everything into our product seamlessly so the business teams don't need to change behavior. And then once it's in the door, we apply no-code automation. And so that's really the technology that allows these requests to be routed to where they need to go without legal intervention. It gets to the right parties to approve. You have an audit trail of everything that goes on. And there's also real-time collaboration that enables you to, to actually work with the business seamlessly. And then there's the reporting as well on the right-hand side. So you can see all of these metrics are available for you right out of the box. As soon as the system is up and running, you're collecting the data and you're getting these very, very valuable reports.
I love it. All right, let me stop sharing my screen so you're both nice and big again. So I think, again, both very practical applications, very kind of business problem solving, like real world problem solving things. So I think, we talked a little bit about your transition from law into founding a tech company, but I think, thinking about you all both being lawyers that have, bar licenses you want to protect. I think when we prepped for this, a really interesting topic came up, which is how does the fact that you're both lawyers change your approach to developing and delivering your product and service, related to confidentiality and compliance and other ways? I think there's some really interesting things there I hadn't thought about. Maybe Kathy, do you want to start?
Absolutely. Yeah. So every single aspect of how we've designed our system has been purpose-built from the beginning around how legal teams work, right? Exactly to your point, Cheryl, leveraging my background, actually having worked as both an individual contributor as well as a manager of a sizable legal function gives me also this perspective around, hey, what is it that the ICs need on the ground to do their work efficiently? And also what do the managers really need in order to manage the team? Advocate for, and I'll just add this here that, we really understood that preserving confidentiality and privilege when working with sensitive requests is of the utmost importance to our customers, right? And in Streamline, requesters actually have the ability to submit a confidential request that's completely shielded from any other user that doesn't have permission.
Oh, I think we lost Kathy. Right? There you are. Oh, I got a little shot. Oh, we lost you just there at the end there.
All right. How about now? Is this a little better? And did you hear me talk about the ability to shield? Really confident.
You broke up on. So go over that point again.
Yeah. So someone will be able to submit a really sensitive request that's completely shielded from anyone that doesn't have the permission or shouldn't be seeing that request. And if you think about employment related issues, you wouldn't even want the whole legal team to see that. You'd only want the employment lawyers to be seeing those requests, right? So we've really architected the product from the ground up to being able to do this. And you can also hide certain fields from the request forms so only the legal team can actually see them or edit them, right? For example, a risk scoring, or you want to flag certain terms that are really, sensitive, and the requester wouldn't be able to see those fields either. So we've been very thoughtful about how, ensuring attorney-client privilege can be preserved. And it's another reason why it's so important to get legal requests out of Slack channels, out of generic intake systems, because they were never, ever designed, right, to think about these issues.
Gosh, that's so amazing. It's so important too to think about, it's something I'm constantly kind of coaching some of the startups that I work with on, is like, you're going to get your people sued. And so here's how you want to think about, like, no, that has to be split from here, or that has to be permission that way. So I think that's a really great point. And having a lawyer at the front of this really helps your product people think through the requirements downstream that maybe a run-of-the-mill tech founder might not get into. Eric, we had a really interesting question that I think ties into this question as well for you. So from Peter, coming through the court universe, there was a question on whether or not your product produced certified transcripts or not, and then thinking about, you and I talked about some things related to what goes on in people's trunk and things like that. So do you want to address that kind of broad question, and then the broader question of how you being a lawyer impacts how you do things?
Absolutely. So the answer, I think that a short answer that is both is compliance is king. And so to Peter's question, so we have a reporter on every single deposition, hearing, EUO. And so the difference, right, is that other court reporting companies, punish you if you do not order a certified transcript, right? There is a no write fee or a takedown fee. And so what we have, right, is we have the reporter and we have the oral stenography technology that is running simultaneously. And so the idea, right, is that getting away from this, requirement to order a certified model, the rough draft, right, the rough draft and the real time that we provide really are for your work product. They're not to be introduced into court. And so they come free on every single deposition or every single EUO, every single hearing. If you want the reporter to prepare a certified, they will, and that's what you would put into evidence in court, what you'd attach to a motion. But the goal, right, is that we know the statistics, right, on how many cases actually go to trial, right? It's less than 5%. It's probably less, even really truly even less than that. And so in a lot of cases, yes, you want to, for your casework, for negotiations, for settlement discussions, even for maybe mediation, right? You want to know exactly what happened at that deposition. You want a record of the testimony, even if it's just as simple as doing your deposition summary as soon as the depo is done. And so what we provide is access to that. And if you want a certified, you can get a certified, but we're just genuinely moving away from this idea that the only way to get a record of the testimony is to order a certified transcript. And the big thing too, right, is that you always have the video and it comes free. It's synced up to the rough draft transcript. You can click and play any part. And so let's say someone's last name is like a crazy spelled last name, like you can still click and play that word. And you're able to pull up anything that happens. So I'd be more than happy to follow up with you after. Almost all our exhibits in PDF format, if electronics. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, the transcript, Peter, to your question, the transcript comes in all the normal formats, in ASCII and TXT and PDF and whatever you need. Again, just the major efficiency piece and the major difference, right, is that you get a near verbatim record of the testimony within 90 minutes of the deposition ending, and you don't have to order a certified unless you eventually need one to put into evidence. So, but I'll definitely follow up with you after.
Yeah, and I think one of the things we talked about, Eric, was the idea that there are rules about
right.
court reporting in different states, and also kind of what's secure and how some of these court reporters secure things. Can you chat a little bit about that?
Yeah, of course. And tying that into your first question, right, is that there's this like this wrestling, right, this tug of war, because as a startup founder, as a tech founder, right, I very much, of course, I'd love to be as successful as they are one day, but very much, think about our business as Uber and taxis, right? You had this established profession that did things one way. You get medallions, it was all a very one track way of doing things, and then you had Uber that just completely disrupted the industry, and it really upset the taxi drivers, kind of in a similar way that we upset like traditional manual stenographers. And so, but Uber, right? They were like, just send people out there, right? Just send people out there. And if they get tickets, we'll pay them. If they get citations, we'll pay them. If they get pulled over, we'll cover their legal fees, but we're going to sort of infiltrate the market. And the difference is, right, is that if I was a non-attorney, I may just be able to follow that, right? But as an attorney, my bar license is on the line for every decision that we make. And so compliance has to be king. So we can't put anything in place unless it is compliant with the rules of the state. And there are requirements around, that is transitioning, into another question, Cheryl, I know you asked, is like, when we talked about the prompts for this meeting is, how has your role shifted? How has your role changed? Right. So like day one, I'm doing everything from sales, hiring people, just doing absolutely everything. And right now, a lot of my work is now focused on regulatory and compliance as we move into new states. And so it's just about making sure you have people, the people that have the right qualifications, the right licenses, handling the depositions, handling the transcripts. And so, but at the end of the day, it's a double-edged sword, because we have the knowledge base and we have the skills and the tools to investigate and confirm, right, without having to hire really, really expensive outside counsel to get us an opinion on the right way to do things. But on the flip side, right, there are just risks that a non-attorney could probably take that I will not take because I think that they'd be out of compliance. So at the end of the day, compliance is king. If you can't use your transcript at trial, then there's no point in using us. So compliance. I mean, that's my motto internally, right? Compliance is king. And we still do have had outside counsel like vet anything that we're doing. But I find that part of the sales process with a number of carriers and clients is like, is providing memos, is going through it with them, and working even with the rules committees, like the rules committee in several states on this issue, and getting confirmation. Hey, if we do this, if we use this workflow, is this compliant with the rules in your state? And waiting till we get confirmation from them before proceeding. So.
Yeah, it's something I had not really thought about, that there's such an inherent difference between a company that's led by an attorney that has a bar license and a company that's not, and the level of risk that they're willing to take. I think Uber is such a great example, because they just went out and went nuts, right, and did whatever they wanted because they had nothing to lose besides money, right? But you all both have licensure to lose, a lifetime of work to lose, and so I think for folks listening, as you're thinking about products that you're considering, and you're thinking about AI and where to put my money, I think there's something to be said for thinking about former lawyers that are leading the companies, for the risk factor, right? Like that might give you, maybe you take a +1 if the lawyer is the founder, right? Like maybe that's the way to think about it. So one of the things that keeps coming up, and I would love to get your all's perspective on this, is, does all AI use have to be disclosed to your client, or is it risk-based? And I think I even saw an article in law.com kind of debating this very topic this morning. And I don't know that there's a right answer, but would love to get your perspective and share that with the viewers. Kathy, you want to start?
Sure. So, we were talking about this.
Maybe turn your video off.
I thought that Eric made a really great point. Yes. Okay. I'm back again. So when we were prepping for this, I think Eric made a really great point that almost everything has AI in it these days, right? Almost all technology, especially even if not today, we're moving in that direction where there's going to be some aspect of machine learning or AI to help the product be more efficient. And there are plenty of products that actually just sit behind the scenes. They're not actually helping the lawyers to create their legal advice. And they're just helping the lawyers work more effectively or more efficiently. So if you're, instead of trying to look in your emails and your inboxes to piece everything together, and instead you're in a system that's gathered everything in one place, you're still on that's giving the legal advice, then do you actually really need to disclose that? Then you'd have to end up disclosing every single piece of technology that you end up using, right? If you think about Gmail now is using AI to complete your sentences, to give you suggestions. Do you have to now also disclose the fact that you're using Gmail? I mean, I think it gets to a point where it starts to feel a little bit ridiculous, right? So I think if you're using a tool that you're truly relying on without any human intervention at all, so you're not quality checking, and that tool is fundamentally substituting for your work. So it's looking up case law for you, it's digesting, it's actually telling you information that you are then passing on to the client. Then in that situation, I do think ethically, it's important for us, to disclose that use. That's just my.
I think that makes a ton of sense. Eric, how about you?
What Eric thinks too.
What's really interesting, and it's a very timely question, because I think 2 days ago or 3 days ago, the Florida Bar put out an advisory opinion on the use of generative AI. It's advisory opinion 24.1 if you want to Google it. And so it's really interesting. And I think that responsibility is a strong word, but what we should be doing, right, as lawyer-led startup and as founders is that you kind of have this danger of regulatory bodies poorly defining what AI is and what generative AI is. And, Kathy took the words right out of my mouth, right? Westlaw uses AI. When you're typing an email and it says, if you just want to put like sounds good, like that is generating, prompts and responses based on training data. And so, and based on other emails you've written. And so it's really just interesting. It adds sort of an extra level of sort of requirement and awareness and consciousness that where you're operating, you want to work with and inform stakeholders on the attorney side that are doing this, because you don't want someone putting out an advisory opinion or like a bad definition or a bad rule in the books, that for example, like that you need client consent to use it basically adds a roadblock, right? If you need specific client consent to use this tool on every case, and it just opens the floodgates, right? Like, what's the limit of that? Because I don't think that people realize, as Kathy said, is that every software you use is leveraging AI, absolutely everything. And so it's I think it's important, like, just to work with stakeholders and in the community and to get those definitions and to get support for it. So it's interesting. I mean, it's very interesting too, because I think that when I approach this and you look at sales and you look at potential customers, and we tell attorneys like we're speeding things up or making them faster, sometimes some attorneys are like, no, I have to make my billables for the month. I don't want you to make it faster for me. What are you talking about? And so a lot of it is like, who you want to work with, looking for a driven attorney profile, a tech-friendly, someone that's interested in innovation. And so I come back to them and say, well, yeah, but you can now resolve 3 cases in the amount of time that it took you to resolve this one. And so it's interesting, who are you selling to? Are you selling to the law firm? Are you selling to the carrier? Are you selling to a company that cares about the costs, things like that? But it is, I mean, I think that attorneys are becoming a lot more willing to use AI, but you're going to start to see some more bar associations and governing bodies that are going to seek to define what AI is, what generative AI is, what attorneys' responsibilities are. And so I think it's going to be interesting to see where it goes. Unfortunately, you have some attorneys, and we all know, but many people probably know, right, that Avianca case at a federal court in New York that are, it was actually cited in the Florida Bar advisory opinion, this proposed one. It's a proposed opinion. It's not a final opinion yet. It was cited directly, I think, in one of the first few paragraphs. You have attorneys that are going to misuse it and just type into ChatGPT, find me a case that says this. And so it's, as you said, talking about guardrails and reliability, like the stuff that Kathy and I are building, and again, falls into that box of like Westlaw, like a Lexis, like this is, we're SOC 2, HIPAA, like you've been reviewed by independent bodies. You are absolutely, like, if you're getting evaluated and you're testing for safety, reliability, confidentiality, things like that. So there's a huge difference between that and some of these publicly available AI tools.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing, right? Consumer grade tech is not necessarily what we need to be using in the legal world. And I think that's a great segue into kind of the next question I was hoping to get into, which is, how do we build trust in legal with AI, right? Like, this is new to all of us. It's a little scary. Some of it is very black boxy, right? I just noticed that ChatGPT is now citing sources. I don't know if anybody's noticed that, but with the last update, it's saying where it's getting the info from. But as founders, how are you building trust with your product, with AI in the legal community? Can you kind of share where you're going with things? Kathy, you want to jump in?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, Cheryl, we've been talking about that already on this podcast, around the fact that Eric and I are approaching this fundamentally differently from many, many other, founders of just generic AI tools that never design their product from the ground up to serve the legal community, right, and legal use cases. And so, if you talk about ChatGPT or building products on top of the generic models like ChatGPT and other open source LLMs, well, that data set was never trained specifically on legal use cases. And so you're going to end up with, hallucinations at worst, or just blanks, and just the inability to actually provide you with information that you need, period. So, for us here at Streamline, what we're doing with our AI product is we're partnering with a company called ClearLaw that's developed a proprietary model, right? And that model was trained specifically on a massive set of contract data. And what it does is it actually parses out contract terms and categorizes it. So we're not here trying to tell you, hey, we're using generative AI to substitute for you to help you draft contracts. No, it's actually using a very, very specialized model to help you scrub through documents. So rather than you pouring through it, we're actually telling you, hey, here are the terms in that contract, and this is what's in range, based on your criteria, what's in your target and what's outside of your target, but we're surfacing the entire term for you. So you also can do a check of it if you wanted to, right? And you can look at the surrounding context. And then our system fires off automation that gets that, you know, the non-standard term to the right people to approve it. So that's how it's saving you time. But again, it's really building trust because we're still leaving the human in the loop to do the quality check. I think, Cheryl, I think that is absolutely critical for lawyers to really, over time, be able to rely more and more on the technology. You need to demonstrate to them that it's accurate and that it works, right? And then also, again, just that very specialized model is really critical as well. I think, Cheryl, you brought up, you know, the fact that ChatGPT recently updated its algorithm, right? And all of a sudden, other platforms that were built on top of that model found their results to really, you know, degrade, right, as a result, and they were losing users. So I would really caution, you know, our audience to look carefully at what kind of model it is that you're using and what kind of use case, you know, are you trying to apply that model to address.
Yeah, I think it's super important. I think something we've talked about a lot is to ask what the underlying model and the underlying technology is. I mean, everything's built on something else, but understanding what the underlying technology is, I think, is super important. Eric, how about you? How are you addressing or working on building kind of trust within the legal community around AI and your product?
So, you know, so what's interesting, right, is incorporating like not just the product generally, but sales specifically, right? When we decide how we're going to speak to prospective customers, it's truly about identifying what we call like the driven attorney profile. And it's a bunch of different sort of prongs, which is, right, someone that's interested in technology, someone that's interested in making their practice more efficient, someone that's interested in resolving more cases, interested in finding ways to enhance their work product with technology. And so what I have found, right, is there are some people we found that are that you may not be able to convert. Like, that's just the reality. They've done things the same way for 50 years, and they don't want to. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Or really, if it's not broke enough. That's what I found more often, right? Where people we talk to, like, yeah, it's not, you know, what the process we're using right now, it's not great, but I'm not going to invest in changing the workflow for the whole office. Or, yeah, sometimes it's inaccurate, or it's too expensive, but it's not so bad that I'm going to change the whole thing. So, you know, I know that sometimes, like, the old adage, right, is good is the enemy of, or good is the, or great is the enemy of good. But it's sometimes like good. For me, it's like good is the enemy of great. And so so I think it's just about identifying people that, you know, champions, right? Whether it's within a single firm or whether it's within a legal community or a company or a carrier, that have respect within the organization that you're working with, and getting them to believe in your product. And so it means everything that Kathy said, right? Just demonstrating reliability, demonstrating guardrails, demonstrating security and confidentiality. But a lot of it is about identifying who the right person to communicate that, to communicate those concepts to is. You could talk till you're blue in the face to someone that mistrusts technology and wants to do things the same way they've always been, and you're just not going to convert them. So a lot of it is like I just identifying the stakeholder or the decision maker at the organization that will be receptive to it.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And then what about security or certifications, those compliance things? What do you already have, or what are you planning on pursuing, both of you, for your companies in terms of certifications in that universe?
Yeah. Kathy, I just finished it. You could talk, or I could talk, whatever you want to do.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. And so we recently obtained our SOC 2 Type 2 certification, not just Type 1. Thank you. Yeah. We're absolutely thrilled, you know, because a lot of work really went into getting that. And typically, if you look at B2B SaaS companies, SOC 2 Type 2 is a certification that companies get much later on in their maturation cycle. I remember my first in-house job, that company didn't get it until past Series B. And for us at our stage, you know, you can see that we're really investing in these security certifications that are, you know, audited, conducted by third party auditors to ensure that we're reaching a certain standard in organizational, and physical controls, right? To ensure that, all of our data, all of our information is being stored, is being protected, is being secured. It's of vital importance to the audience that we serve, and we've known that from the beginning. So down the road, we absolutely plan on getting specialized certifications as we, focus more on certain industries. But for now, SOC 2 Type 2 will allow us to pass the vast majority of security assessments. And our client base, we serve multiple public companies, both Logitech and Affirm, the buy now, pay later fintech company. They're both customers of ours. And, that, once you're a public company, you absolutely need to have certain standards and controls in place when you bring on vendors. So we've really been able to meet those criteria, right, from even our largest customers.
Well, congratulations, Chad. That is not a fun process to go through. So SOC 2 Type 2 is fun. Eric, how about you?
Yes, the same with SOC 2 as Kathy, and then also HIPAA. And a lot of it is, the carriers we work with are very concerned about, you get medical records all the time that are put into evidence at a deposition or hearing. And so storing and keeping those is vital. And so this, by the way, ties back into a lot of the questions you're asking, right? Which is talking about innovation, which is what I've found is this. I think I know the reason why, but what you find, right, is that when you have people ask, prospective customers ask these RFPs, and even for basic questions even when they make quick decisions, they want to ask a ton of questions about security. And these RFPs are hundreds of questions, right, about AI and security. And it's so interesting to me because old school traditional vendors that they implicitly trust, right, is one nice lady showing up like with her briefcase and her old laptop and typing things up, and all the exhibits get stored in a folder, and then she goes back to the office and puts it like in a folder where everybody, in a filing cabinet that everybody has access to. Her password is password 123, and so we absolutely are like all in this space, like where Kathy and I are advertising and demonstrating and proving and showing evidence of how much time and resources and experts we're using to just have like the highest level security protocols necessary, and people are mistrustful of it, but inherently trust something that any of us would know, like in a vacuum, is completely unsafe. Like just sending emails from, so many core reporters have like Hotmail emails and Yahoo emails, and it's like they're just sending medical records and sending transcripts on confidential cases via email from their Hotmail, and it's like, what do you like? Why is it that you're doing a deep dive into what we're doing, but you're just not even blinking twice at what this person that is doing something that we know is unsecure is doing? So I don't know. There's quite an answer to like convert people to say, are you sending that same questionnaire to Sally's court reporting? In the middle of in a rural area in the state, like, do you know if her doors are locked? Like, because we have like our Kubernetes nodes, and we have all this encryption, and we have security, multi-factor authentication, all this stuff. But like, are you asking if their doors are locked at night, or if if their maintenance workers could get into their filing cabinets? Like, are you locking your briefcase when you bring it to, when it's in the car with you? Is your doors locked? And so it's just interesting. It's interesting. You get these like very high level, sophisticated security questions because we present ourselves as technologically savvy, but the same thing doesn't go for old school providers.
Yeah, I mean, it's really amazing to think about, and hopefully some of the folks will start asking harder questions of some of their traditional providers.
Right.
So we're getting close to the top of the hour. So if you have any questions, throw them in the Q&A. Kathy, I had a question that I wrote down when we talked that I loved it. The question I wrote down are customers thinking beyond what's possible today? Has the art of the possible gone too far? And I know you had a great customer story on this.
Right. No, it's so funny, Cheryl, because I think with all of this recent hype around AI and AI capabilities, very rightly so. People are very, very keen to understand, the upper bounds of what is possible with technology. And we had a really good laugh about this on some of our prospect calls, where they're hoping that the system would just work by itself, when it's actually it's an intake and workflow system to help you do your work more efficiently. But they're like, why is it that I need to even indicate in the system if I'm working on something and update the status? Can the statuses not even just update themselves as I'm working in Word, and I'm thinking, okay, well, what we're really, hoping to do, obviously, is make your work more efficient, but we haven't gotten to the point yet where we can duplicate for your mind, for your brain, and literally read your mind. So, and I actually think, that's interesting, because it's a lot of the sensitivity is around that, right? Where people are really nervous that there's now something that can substitute for their expertise and really be providing kind of the legal guidance. And I, even though I'm in this space, I'm building a product and has a lot of different technological aspects to it, I am a firm believer that legal is, and legal work is essentially a very human activity. And there's so much nuance, there's so much context into what we do, that you can't just apply something black and white. And I still believe that we're a ways away from a machine being able to truly replicate for that, right? But what it can do, and what we're here to talk about, is obviously all of the very, very low value, manual use cases that you do not need someone who's had this very sophisticated level of training. It's also a very, very expensive resource. You do not need them to be kind of doing this work. But let's not let the products like read lawyers' minds and then substitute for lawyers. Yeah.
I love that. Well, and I think though that's such a positive sign that like at least people are thinking about the art of the possible, right? Like at least it's different than saying like, no, I don't want it. Like, no, thank you, hard pass, right? I want to do things the old way. At least they're asking for things to read their mind. I feel like that's progress, right? I'll take it. So before we get to the end, I think I would love to kind of think about or talk about, how you all might involve legal professionals in the ongoing development and improvement of your products. How does feedback from the real world, from real professionals, help you as you develop? I think, Eric, I learned about your product, I think, from Michael Stevens, a lawyer who works with you all and had nothing but, he was raving about you when I met him at Ilticon. And so that's how you and I connected. And I think people like him, where he works with several startups that I work with, where he's just like very closely working with people. One of my other friends, Catherine, who it looks like she had to drop, she does a lot of work like that. So how does working with people in the legal community help develop your products further?
Yeah, so there's a couple different answers to that question. I mean, number one is like just getting champions in the legal community to sort of spread the gospel in an organic way, or in an advisory board way, is vital. As lawyers, we very much rely on relationships and trust. And the same thing, like if someone wants an expert in another state, what do? They call up someone they know, they're a firm there, and say, who do you use, right? Who do you use, in Indiana or Iowa? Who's your fire expert there? So relationships are huge. And so when you have social proof of, like, Michael Stevens is a giant in the subrogation space. When you have social proof of attorneys, it obviously adds a significant amount of credibility and to your ability to grow. The second piece of that, I think, right, is actually affecting, and modifying the product and improving the product. And we know how valuable attorneys' time is, right? And so it's just about, just developing a relationship with your customers and saying, here's what we do. What else do you need? What else do you want? What would make this better? And it's constantly coming up with stuff. And I think that when you treat your customers like that, it really enhances the relationship and just adds a level of being genuine, because, US Legal, Veritext, Esquire, like, they're not going to the law firm and being like, hey, do you want us to change something? Do you like the format of our transcript? Do you, there's these are the required formats. Which one do you like? What do you like, they don't even have an online platform. But to say, do you want us to modify things, to enhance things, to grow things, to make them better? And so I think that it's just extremely important to incorporate them. And we regularly do. as much as we can, we're asking the stakeholders at our customers to say, can we get 15, 20 minutes with you? Can we bring lunch to your office? What do you like? What don't you like? What would you change if you could? That kind of thing. And so obviously there's somewhat of inherent danger if they're like, we want a unicorn, we want a unicorn sticker on all of our depots. You have to be able to say no, right? Because they're like, it'd be really cool if you did this. So you have to just be realistic and say these, we are, and of course we have like a roadmap, right, for what our team is developing already. But I think that it enhances the customer relationship if you have that an open line of communication where your clients can suggest changes, and where they're reasonable, make them.
Love it. Kathy, how about you? How do you go about connecting with the community and bringing things forward that they might be interested in? Oh, you're on mute if you're... Did we lose Kathy? Oh, we may have lost Kathy. I hope not. All right, we may have lost Kathy.
Well, I don't want to speak on her behalf. If she comes in, I'll say something nice about Kathy to filibuster till she comes back. What I would just say is that what Kathy created, it really is, it's excellent. And so, even when we've had a couple of conversations, and when she was talking now, that it really has application, not just to law firms, but it has application to what Parrot's doing as well, which is right. At startups, at least on the legal tech side, right? You typically have someone that's involved, that's an attorney or has some legal experience, or you have a relationship with an attorney. And so what she built, we had that problem too, right? Like people would just ask me, pepper me with questions in Slack. Can we do this? Can we do that? What's the rule on this? Can you write something up for me? A client needs this, a client needs that. So we created a Notion page, right, where people can just submit questions and we track it. But have evolved right into what Kathy created, right, which is Streamline, which is it's applicable not just to law firms and corporations. I mean, it's certainly if you have a legal component and you want to segregate those questions from other types of requests that come in an organized way, I think it's an excellent tool.
Eric, I'm going to make you my new spokesperson.
Filibustering until you get back online. I had to.
You're amazing. Thank you so much. I know I dropped, and I'm so sorry. My internet's been much worse than it's been in the last couple of weeks. But I think the question was around how we involve customers, right, in the ongoing development. Right. I'll just keep this concise because I know we're about to end soon. I truly believe that getting real customer feedback is not just important, it's essential to the development and ongoing success of a product. I love what Eric is doing, at Parrot with even like in person, right? Just grabbing lunch and getting real live feedback from their customers. We've absolutely done the same. We've done whiteboarding sessions with some of our more kind of innovative and product-minded customers, but every single customer, just through their work with our head of customer success, has given us tons and tons of feedback that we've incorporated and built into our product, which is a big part of why we have since the founding of Streamline, which I think, that's a pretty rare metric, right, to have achieved 100% customer retention. And it's really because, I know, even though I've seen quite a bit during my years of practice, I absolutely cannot say I've seen everything. Every single legal team has their nuances, quirks, right? And they do things.
Looks like we lost her again. All right.
No. I'm back. But
okay, back.
But I wrapped up basically. I think the key is just, yes, you need your customers to be on board to help you develop.
I love it. All right, cool. Well, we're about 2 minutes to close. If anybody has a question, I don't see any pending right now, but we'd love to give you, Kathy, I know you're jumping on an airplane to go somewhere, so we'd love to give you each, a minute to tell us about where you're going to be next or what you have going on, and give us some closing thoughts. Kathy, you want to close this out, and then we'll let Eric finish?
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you. And this has been such a great conversation. I love kind of diving into all these different areas. So in closing, I'll just say that, our vision is really to help transform the way that corporate legal teams work by making them more empowered and more effective. I truly believe that corporate legal, in many cases just needs a brand manager, right? We're doing incredible work, we're slaving away, and there's not enough recognition of that within the business. And they see us, unfortunately, as a blocker or as a cost center rather than a revenue enabler and driver, which we really truly are. So by leveraging tools like Streamline, we're hoping to achieve less burnout for our corporate legal users, and helping them, it's engaging to do the work they're doing and not getting lost in the low value, very, very manual aspects of just shuffling things around.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Kathy. It has been a pleasure to have you today. Eric, bring us home.
Sure. So the goal very much, right, is to get away from old school, inefficient ways of doing things. A lot of attorneys simply conceive of a deposition transcript as being a piece of paper that you read and use for impeachment or attach to a motion. And my vision and what we've implemented, right, is way beyond that, where I want you to be able to live impeach a witness with testimony they gave 30 seconds ago, 30 minutes ago. I want you to be able to cross or take a direct of a witness in the morning, and then instead of having to just say, you remember X occurred during examination this morning, to actually put up the audio and video and the testimony, the clip up in your PowerPoint presentation of their testimony. Currently, all these tools are extremely expensive. Getting, for example, like a video depo is astronomically expensive, and it's only reserved for experts. But you just can't overemphasize how important getting a video depo is when seeing someone's body language when you ask them an uncomfortable question and being able to show that to the jury. But it's typically too expensive on small claims. And so the whole goal, right, and there really is an access to justice component to this, right, which is that you should never lose a case or not get as much as you want out of a case because court reporting is too expensive. Or it's too expensive to take a depo on this case. And so the idea very much is just making tools that have been for a very, very long time only accessible to tiny boutique or national law firms, and giving every attorney the power to leverage audio and video depos, sync transcripts, getting transcripts super fast, without having to order. If you want a transcript if you want a transcript the same day, it's going to cost you 10 times the amount it costs for a typical certified transcript. That's like a 10 business day turnaround. And we're giving it to you in 90 minutes for free. And so I can't tell you how many attorneys I spoke to that have an extra person at the depo just to take notes. It's such a waste of time. And so it's just very much about, we're not obviously not trying to replace lawyers. It's very much about giving lawyers tools to do better on their cases, to get larger recoveries, to get larger verdicts, to get larger settlements in ways that, were typically very, very expensive, but technology has empowered you to do in a cost-efficient way now.
I love it. Well, thank you both for being here. Both of your products are empowering lawyers, not replacing lawyers, making lawyers' lives better. So thank you both for being here. Thanks to all who attend, and thanks who are watching online. Appreciate everything, and join us for our next session next Wednesday at noon. Thanks again.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. Thank you,
Great to be here. Thank you so much. Take care.